Good morning. I'm Diane Lewis, the Executive Vice President of the Paley Center for Media, and it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to today's special Paley Dialogue, a conversation with Foursquare's co-founder and Executive Chairman Dennis Crowley and CEO Jeff Glueck, moderated by Fast Company Senior Editor Amy Farley. 8 years ago, Foursquare was introduced as one of the hottest apps for your mobile phone. The idea was that people would use the app to check in and share their location and recommendations with friends for everything from bars to Airbnbs. Since then, it has evolved into the preeminent location intelligence company that powers Apple, Snapchat, Uber, Twitter, Microsoft, Samsung, and over 100,000 other developers. In 2014, the app split into Foursquare Swarm, the check-in app, and Foursquare City Guide, the app which guides users on the best things to do and places to go. The biggest evolution for the company, though, has come over the past 3 years. Today, we'll hear how Dennis and Jeff together are creating innovative consumer experiences, informing business decisions for the future, all with the power of location intelligence. As co-founder and executive chairman, Dennis oversees strategic vision for product innovation and innovation. Before stepping into his current role, Dennis was the company's CEO for nearly 7 years. He previously founded Dodgeball, one of the first mobile social services, which was acquired by Google in 2005. I think I'll put my glasses on so I can actually see. Jeff became CEO of Foursquare in 2016 after 18 months as COO. Earlier, he was CEO of Skyfire Labs. He also co-founded Site59.com, an online travel company that was acquired by Travelocity. We're also thrilled to have moderating today Senior Editor Amy Farley, who oversees Fast Company's next section covering innovation and creativity in business. And now, before I turn it over to today's panelists, I want to recognize McKinsey, our long-term and valued official knowledge partner. We really thank you for supporting this special event. We're also delighted to have so many Media Council members in attendance, and I want to give a special welcome to all of our new members today. We're thrilled to have you here, and thank you all so much for joining. Before we begin, though, just please indulge me for one more moment, as I'd like to tell you briefly about some of the exciting programs coming up this year. On May 8th, we'll have an impact program on local news with speakers including NBC News and MSNBC Chairman Andy Lack and Facebook's Campbell Brown. On June 8th, Paley trustee and the chairman of NBC Universal's International Group and NBC Universal Telemundo Enterprises, Cesar Conde, will be the featured speaker. On June 28th, we'll have our first event in Silicon Valley, Beyond Hollywood, Entertainment in a Digital Age, hosted by board member Devin Wenig, CEO of eBay, with Tina Brown moderating, and board members John Martin, chairman and CEO of Turner, and Josh Sapin, president and CEO of AMC Networks, Inc., as two of the featured guests. On July 11th, we have a Best of Con event with Paley trustee John Miller and LA Board of Governor Michael Kassan and others. September 7th, Paley board member Mike Hopkins, CEO of Hulu, will join us. Even my glasses don't help. On October 3rd, we'll have Viacom's Shari Redstone speaking with John Miller, both trustees of the Paley Center. And on December 7th, we'll have a program with Michael Kassan, which will focus on predicting trends for 2018. In addition to our New York programs, we also host dialogues at the Paley Center in Los Angeles. In fact, we have one this evening with Casey Bloys, HBO's president of programming, in conversation with Issa Rae. You just have enough time to catch a plane after this to make it that event, so I expect to see you all there. On June 1st in LA, we'll feature board member Deborah Lee, chairman and CEO of BET Networks, in conversation with Will Packer, executive producer of Being Mary Jane. So for those of you who are invited guests today and not yet members, I encourage you to join this special Media Council community so that you can attend these very special programs, events, and more. So now on to today's program. I'm thrilled to turn it over to our distinguished moderator, Amy Farley. Thank you.
That was a terrific introduction. I think that I will start right with the introduction to talk about the evolution of Foursquare, and then we can talk more about what you're doing now. But you started, there was a time not too long ago when you were the hot consumer-facing app. People wanted to become mayors of different locations. You were offering people really interesting peer-driven city guides. Then you split into Swarm and Foursquare, and now you have a host of different enterprise business-facing products that encompass analytics, advertising, location insights. Can you talk to us about sort of that evolution and and whether or not that was really a pivot. I mean, from the outside, it seems like a huge pivot, but obviously location intelligence was there all along. So Dennis, can you tell us, I mean, did you envision going into sort of the enterprise space when you first started?
Not specifically going into the enterprise space, but the way that we used to think about the company, and we still do, like going even way back to the very early days, was, we're making software that makes like cities easier to use. And then when we outgrew just New York, it was like making software that makes the world easier to use. And a lot of that is understanding the movement and relationship between people and places. Now, I've always been like a consumer product person, so I look at it through the lens of a consumer product person. You make apps that people use that change the way that they end up using the cities, and it's really the journey of Foursquare and the 8 years of doing it and meeting people like Jeff and growing a huge team and bringing in all these different points of view has been able to kind of open my eyes to like, listen, it doesn't have to just be all about the consumer all the time. It's about making these tools and technologies for anyone to use, for marketers, for brands, for developers, for agencies, for urban planners. And I think that's been the really interesting part of the story. Like the stuff that we built really for ourselves and for our friends that turned out to be used by all of their friends is now very relevant and like a very interesting business for so many different audiences and so many different partners of ours.
So then, Jeff, you came in. Did you what was the relationship in sort of bringing forward all of these business-facing products? Was that you driving that, or did you already have that vision, Dennis, and you've been working together? I know that started back in 2013. You were really sort of looking at it before you even came on board.
Yeah, I think Dennis did this amazing talk for all of our employees about the history of the company, and going back to Vindigo and going back, the Palm Pilot and things that Dennis had been working on, Dodgeball, about how, we were trying as a company to build technology that would be in your pocket, and there was this mission statement from 6 years ago, like someday hundreds of millions of people will have software in their pocket that sort of guides them around the world and does what we now call context-aware computing. Hey, I'm at a new place. What could I learn? What should I order? You're at Balthazar for the first time. Your friends say, order this dish. Or I'm in Barcelona, and we know that that's not your typical neighborhood. You're around the corner from the best tapas place in Barcelona. Just sort of context-aware computing. And Dennis was trying to build that years ago, but the technology didn't exist. Like you go way back, you had to tell, does anyone remember Vindigo? Like you had to tell it, I'm at 35th Street and 5th Avenue, like you had to type it in. And so Pilgrim, which we launched this year for other companies, now is kind of the embodiment of, we have tens of millions of users of our own, but we weren't going to get to hundreds of millions or billions very easily. And now that software is powering things in Snapchat and Uber and Twitter and Pinterest and Apple Maps and Microsoft Cortana and Tencent, and I could go on and on. And so we are, reaching that vision of this context-aware computing that Dennis started working on. And adding in the enterprise piece was something that probably we came up with because that was a way to create a really valuable, influential company. And so when I arrived, we started to charge developers that were using our platform. We had 70,000 developers, when I arrived.
They were using it for free.
They were all using it for free. And I remember having a debate, like, we're going to start charging them. And a couple people internally were like, you can't do that. We might lose some developers if you charge them. Well, what have you got to lose? They're not paying you. So we started, and it just took off. And everyone we called said, I was wondering when you were going to call. Yeah, of course we'll pay. And so we're in this nice place where there's only 3 companies in the world, I'm sure we'll cover this, that can do what we do. Sort of Facebook, Google, and us, that can map the entire world and know when a phone enters or exits a particular one of 100 million business, just when it's the phone's in your pocket or in your purse. And so we're kind of the Switzerland, and that's turned out to be a great place. So we do advertising, we do developer tools, we do analytics, and it's been a fun positioning. And now the company's growing, so I think people are feeling it. But there were a lot of early debates. We had to shift resources from consumer, which still is about 40% of our R&D, into the enterprise products, and that had some strident internal debates. But then it became moot because it was working.
Can you stop and unpack a little bit the Pilgrim technology, because that's the foundation, and I don't think that everybody realizes that you don't need to check in, that there's passive tracking of people, implicit check-ins. You know when somebody sort of stops in a location for a certain amount of time, and you can get sort of the shape of a place. That's sort of the foundation to everything that follows. Can you sort of walk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, that idea is core to the idea of we should be able to understand what the devices are. Is one of the reasons that we started the company. I had a company before this called Dodgeball, and we were trying to build it at Google. And you had to, in order to get any of this data from users, you had to always check in, do the manual process. And so when we started Foursquare, that was the only technology you had. Like, ask the user to do the thing that you need them to do. And it was around 2010, probably 2011, that we really started heavily investing in, listen, we know that people aren't going to take their phones out of their pocket and check in. Like, that's just not going to happen forever. Like, we have this window of time. And so let's get to work on making this engine that can kind of learn where these places are and then understand as people enter and exit different spots. And it turned out to be a lot harder to build that engine than we thought. Like, we have to, first of all, we have to learn about every single place in the world, right? And thankfully, we have an army of people that use the products that are doing that every day for us. Then we have to learn about what makes those places unique and what are the unique fingerprints of them. And it's not just GPS, but it's what are the Wi-Fi signals there? What are the Bluetooth signals there? What does it look like when, what does it look like to a cell phone that's talking to the nearby towers? And so it turns out that every single place on Earth, even if you're on the 7th floor or 6th floor or 5th floor, or the place across the street or the place below it, every place has its unique fingerprint. And so every time that someone goes around and does something in one of our apps, uploads a photo or likes a place or checks in or whatnot, it's adding to that data set saying oh, this is what that Starbucks looks like. This is all the signals that we see in it. And so over the last couple of years, we've been building a piece of technology that we've been using in our own internal apps, in the Foursquare app and the Swarm app. So as people walk around, we can start sending you notifications. Oh, you just walked into the store, this is what you need to know about. Oh, you just walked into Balthazar, this is what you need to order. And that is what we've been calling Pilgrim. The big move this year has been opening that up so other developers can use that superpower of ours so that they can have that same type of functionality in their app that, if you bring the Nike app into a shoe store, something happens. If you bring the Starbucks app into a Dunkin' Donuts, something happens. If you bring your Beer Lovers app into a brewery, something lights up. And so that type of stuff has been really interesting for us in terms of, we take the superpower that we've had, and we've only had it in our 2 apps, and now we're bringing it and allowing pretty much any, we will be eventually, any developers that want to take advantage of that stuff and build those types of features using that.
You just opened that up in March, but you already have Capital One, some sort of really interesting people that are using it. Can you talk a little bit specifically about what they're doing?
So what the Pilgrim SDK does is allow that superpower, background awareness, as opposed to the 100,000 developers that were already using our data sets in the foreground. So we've given kind of the phone in your pocket intelligence to other apps. So the way Capital One and lots of other developers are using it is, they want people to use the Capital One mobile wallet. And so it smartly and discreetly, if you're at a gas station, it will say, hey, double Capital One rewards points this month on gas, if that's true. Or you walk into a Sephora and it'll say, hey, triple Capital One rewards points if you use your mobile wallet on beauty purchases this week. And so, but it's the right time, the right place. It's useful content. We advise all of our developers, you can't bother people unless you have something really valuable to say, or else they'll shut you off very quickly. And we've learned that because we send millions of personal tips each day to our own users. We've learned that, that kind of apocryphal story of we'll be walking around and there'll be Starbucks coupons bouncing at us that is told at every marketing conference for the last decade. That's actually a nightmare dystopia, and so we're very thoughtful about. We wait until someone's actually stopped and spent a few minutes at a business. We want to be sure they're not just walking by, and then you only talk to them if they have something really valuable to say. So how
do you ensure that? I mean, the genie is about to come out of the bottle.
Right.
Just
right.
let the developers in. So.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you have this understanding and this respect for your users?
Yeah. Well, one of the beauties of building a developer platform is people will use it and will abuse it. We try to consult with them. And so right now, as it's coming out of the gate, we review every case and we work with them. So that's partly why we haven't opened it up to what's called general availability or GA, like our APIs, which 100,000 developers use. And because you can't police it, so we're trying to establish norms. Obviously, we have terms of service, and there are a bunch of areas that you're not allowed to see as a developer for privacy reasons, which we can talk about. But we're trying to be very thoughtful about how to roll, because we're in this kind of, Dennis calls it like an awkward phase, where technology is changing and people are trying to get used to these new norms. But people will come up with uses that we hadn't thought of, which is the beauty of opening up an open platform. One of our biggest apps right now is an app called TouchTunes. Has anyone ever heard of this app? So millions of people love this digital jukebox app, and they spend lots of money on it. You can go into a restaurant and you can queue up songs, and you pay, instead of dropping a quarter in, you do it with your phone. Well, they have 65,000 bars and restaurants across the US and millions of users, but they had this problem is that people who loved the service didn't know when they were at a restaurant or bar that had the TouchTunes box. So now it lights up and their business has doubled. So it's that kind of thing. You're going to see, we have an app called SnipSnap that has coupons, and the problem is people would forget to use the coupons. So now we've doubled their business overnight because it's like, hey, you clipped that coupon at Bed Bath & Beyond. You're at Bed Bath & Beyond. Don't forget to use it. And that, again, is really useful information at the right time and the right place. And you don't hear from it when it's not relevant. So that's kind of our dream.
So this is what's happening with Pilgrim, but then you've got Uber and Snap and Twitter and Tencent and all these other companies that are using your location awareness, your location technology. Can you talk about sort of your relationship with them and?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two primary tools that we have for the developers. There's the API, which allows you to access like the 100 million, the database of 100 million places that we have, and then there's the Pilgrim SDK, which is the relatively new piece of technology that runs in the background. And as Jeff was saying, it's about 100,000 developers. Everyone from the biggest companies in the world down to students at colleges and universities around the country that are building interesting things on top of it. But what's turned out to be a really interesting business is being able to license that place database to people that want to use it, right? So when Snapchat wants to put geo-filters in their app, and it wants to be different if you're in a coffee shop or if you're in a baseball stadium, they need to know where all the coffee shops and baseball stadiums are. And that's not what Snapchat does. Snapchat makes these awesome apps. And so we come in and say, actually, we know where all the coffee shops and baseball stadiums and 100 million other places are, so why don't you build on top of that data set? And it's the same thing with Uber. If you say, hey, I need to be picked up at the Paley Center, right? There's a good chance that writing that query coming back, that's going to hit our servers and say, oh, we know the address. This is the address for that. That's still that long, and the car shows up 5 minutes later. Same for Twitter, Pinterest, any of these services where you're attaching a piece of content to a place name. A lot of the times it's our data that's driving that. And so it's interesting, where there's I meet a lot of people that are like, oh, Foursquare, yeah. I used to use that and become the mayor years ago, but I haven't used it in a while. And I'm like, well, I bet you've touched the data sometime in the last 24 hours without knowing it. And that's a great business for us.
Yeah. And are some of those partners then also feeding into your data as well? Is that sort of a virtuous cycle that happens there?
So, every one of the big partners is a little different. Some contribute back, some don't. But every time someone tags a tweet on Twitter, we offer a list. We think you're at the gym, but if you're actually at the juice generation below the gym and you change from picking the first thing to the second thing that we offer up inside Twitter, we learn from that. We capture the sensors. Twitter doesn't pass us the user identity. They just pass us which place a Twitter user, and that makes our data set better. If you tag any place on Pinterest in the world that's using our hosted service to tag, we suggest, oh, that's a photo of a bike shop in Tokyo. And so we're right 90+% of the time, but we're almost always right if the first 2 or 3 choices, right? Because sometimes you're standing between a business, and so but all of that comes back and trains the data. So now when we when Uber picked us, they talked to the Twitter and Yahoo and Pinterest people who were using us, and then when Snapchat last year moved onto our platform to build geofilters, they talked to the Uber folks, and so everyone it's kind of spirals. And we've nicely become the platform that everyone wants to use. And if you want to build a really differentiated service, a lot of these big companies don't want to depend on a company they view as at best a frenemy. So we in Samsung, we're a big part of the Bixby smart assistant that's launching, and we've been powering every photo taken on a Samsung phone globally, we tag to help auto build albums, and this is your trip to Disneyland or whatever. So billions of times a week they're hitting our service. They built that with us and not with Google for obvious reasons. If you're Samsung, right, and you go down the line, Uber and Google aren't necessarily friends anymore. I mean, all of these things, and you want a platform that you can trust to build on. I remember talking to an auto company recently and asking them, it was one of the big three, I won't say who, and it was their head of research in Palo Alto, and I said, Google's going to offer you software to run the car. Are you going to take that? Because it'll be good software. And this person said, well, that didn't work out well for HTC, did it? So it's that kind of ethos that I think is powering our rise.
Right. I mean, you have a lot of huge partners that are using your services, but there's two that are missing. And so you were saying you see yourself as the Switzerland. You're offering developers and other companies opportunities to compete better with Facebook and Google.
That's right.
Do you find that a lot of people are now seeking you out because of that?
I think for sure. It used to be, years ago, that companies startups would do a bake-off between, Google data and Facebook data and Foursquare data, and a lot of times we would come out and win. But now, when I talk to developers, it's just kind of the thing that you always start with Foursquare data, and Foursquare data can solve 95% of the problems you're trying to solve with your own app. And so, when we started the company, we did our own bake-off, right? So we looked at what Yahoo, this is back in 2009, right? Yahoo had an API for places, and Yelp had one, and we looked at them both of these are awful. What are we going to use? It's well, why don't we just make our own? And then when we make it, we'll just open it up so everyone can use it. And that's how the API started. And we had no idea it was going to be the 100 million places, and that the company would be around 8 years later with 250 employees. But it's just kind of the way it happens.
So part of what you've done in the last few years is sort of introducing people to the new Facebook as a location intelligence.
Foursquare.
Foursquare. That's terrible.
Yeah.
The new Foursquare as a location intelligence company is doing these really uncannily accurate retail predictions. You knew what iPhone sales were going to be in 2015. You predicted the foot traffic drop-off for Chipotle after its E. coli outbreaks in 2016. Can you talk a little bit, and now you've sort of created an analytics dashboard for companies. So you're helping, obviously, the Samsungs and Apple and Snap, but you're also helping brick and mortar retailers
Right.
and companies like that. Can you talk about the services you offer them and how that's been rolling out?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of, when Ben Horowitz, who's the biggest investor from Andreessen Horowitz, introduced Dennis and I arrived, I had been CMO of Travelocity, and I spent $1 billion on advertising. If you ever saw the roaming gnome, you can blame me for him. And so when I arrived, I was like, oh my God, this is a cookie for the real world. I mean, I'd lived in e-commerce and digital startups, and if you know anything about how Google's business work, it's primarily direct marketing. You see an ad and you click and you go buy a ticket to Chicago, and we track that on the cookie, and so I know Google's working for me, et cetera, et cetera. 92% of the economy takes place in the real world. Still, U.S. Census data, 2017, as fast as Amazon is growing, the real world is still where groceries and autos and most apparel and everything else is still bought, and so there's no cookie for that. And so if you are you're head of marketing for Subway sandwich franchises with 20,000 locations, or McDonald's, or Macy's, or you name it, you don't know whether your marketing is working in the way that a digital marketer does, tracking at that cookie level. So it was clear that this could be that, and so we kind of have, if you're familiar with Google Trends or Google Analytics, we kind of built that for the real world. And so at an aggregate anonymous level, you can see, oh, my sales are down. Is it because my competitors are eating my lunch, or the market's really growing in terms of really shrinking? And you can look at it am I losing millennials in the Los Angeles area as a retailer? I mean, you can really drill down and understand where your foot traffic, your footfall is increasing or decreasing by who's coming. You can see how many are tourists, how many come from work, how many come from home, how far they travel. And so we have all kinds of really interesting analytics. And now, as the retail space obviously is going through store closures, we're helping them understand, how far will people travel to go to a certain apparel store or a drugstore, the like. As you close, do you lose customers? Did they come to your other location? And so we've done a lot of analytics, but we got a lot of attention by doing some high wire act predictions. We went on TV and said, this is how many iPhones Apple's going to sell based on watching foot traffic in all of these places around the world. We predicted McDonald's would have a massive quarter with their first growing quarter in years with the all-day breakfast launch, and they did. And then I went on TV and said Chipotle sales would be down 30% when they announced earnings in 2 weeks in Q1, and they announced 29.7. So we were, So
I know you have confidence in your technology, but did you still cheer when it came in so close to the number?
We were a little, anytime you go on CNBC and make a prediction, you could be wrong. I mean, it's the Nate Silver problem, I guess. It's a sample data, and it's always probabilities. And so I definitely remember we were waiting for the Apple number to come out, and we all cheered when we nailed it. But yeah, no, it's a little nerve-wracking, but it put us on the map. We were confident in the technology, but there's always a margin of error, so we've been pretty lucky so far. But we work with now 3 of the 5 largest hedge funds as well, who want to improve their stock picks, and obviously that's not a big part of our business, but we mostly want to help retailers and offline companies understand things. And if you're a CPG company, we want to help you understand how the world's changing as CPG sales go through physical retailers. As that shifts, where should you be putting your point of sale marketing dollars and everything else that you need to adjust to a changing world? And so we're trying to help people through that.
And then the last element is you have products for marketers and advertising products, and that's an increasingly big part of your business, right? That's growing quickly.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of what those are and how you're expanding?
You want me to go?
Yeah. They're killing it. Go ahead. Keep going.
Dennis leads all of our consumer products and consumer innovation, and so as you may have detected, I think a lot about the enterprise side. So I'll take this one. But the thing about it is, in a world where 92% of spending happens offline, we're building really interesting audiences for 50 of the top 100 Ad Age advertisers, right? And so if you are the CMO of McDonald's and you want to go after people who now have shifted from McDonald's to Burger King, we can find millions of phones that fit that profile. We have a network of other apps that also provide us information that we can interpret using these shapes that you saw. And then we'll, if Nike wants to find 20 million US smartphones that go to the gym 3 times a week, we can create a segment for that and provide them advertising across thousands of apps. And if Anheuser-Busch wants to talk to millennials who go to bars frequently in 20 DMAs, we can find those phones as well. And then we can measure the impact of seeing ads on walk-in to stores, which is one of our other magic tricks. That's back to the cookie for the real world. And so we build audiences, and we never transfer data. To be very clear, they come and AT&T will buy $1 million of advertising from us, and we'll help them find people who've recently been at a Sprint store or a Verizon store or something like that. So, but we also have launched attribution as a open service, so you don't have to buy advertising from us. And so tons of advertisers, this is one of our fastest growing products. It's probably growing 300% this year. And that is, you can buy a campaign from AOL or Yahoo or wherever, and we'll tell you whether the ads are working. Whether people who saw the ad for the Subway sandwich shop are more likely to walk in compared to a control group after seeing the ad over the next week, because we have a big enough panel, it's like a Nielsen panel of the real world, that we can do an overlap and see the impact versus similar people at an incremental level. As I always say, as a marketer, you shouldn't care how many people walk into Subway. You should care how many more walked into Subway thanks to the advertising. And so we're able to really measure that in a mathematically robust way for people, and that's powerful because the classic adage, half my marketing spend is wasted. Now we're trying to eat into that. I'm sorry if that disrupts any businesses in this room, but it's really. But even better, like we can say, hey, the ad for healthy subs is working for women in this demographic in these DMAs, and the ad for like the double marinara bacon sub or whatever it is working for these demographics and in these cases, and so we're really able to help them refine their marketing.
So you're talking about something magical here, which is the understanding, sort of the bridging of digital and real world insights. And Dennis, back to you, because you've been doing this for 15 years, sort of developing location technology. And I know when Google bought Dodgeball, seems they didn't really sort of develop and sort of understand the value of that. But now people really do. I mean, this is a very important opportunity, sort of understanding what's happening in the real world. We're very sophisticated at tracking people's online movements. You're now bringing us to sort of tracking their real world movements. Can you talk about sort of how you've seen that landscape shift? I mean, obviously people have understood the market opportunities, your technology has become more sophisticated. What happened in the last 15 years to get us here?
Well, a lot of the technology has gotten better, right? So like before Foursquare, I was working, I was at Google, and before Google, I was working on Dodgeball. Before Dodgeball, we were at grad school at NYU, at this research lab called ITP, like the intersection of art and technology. And that's where the whole like make software that changes the way that you use the world came from. Because at the time we were using, we used Friendster, this is like the 2004, right? And you'd spend all day on Friendster, like making friends and doing whatever, and then you'd close the lid on your laptop, and it was like, that whole universe isn't helping you when you leave the building and go walk around in the streets. It's like, that's where the stuff has to start connecting. And so, I think the stuff that we were working at NYU was way ahead of its time. The stuff that we were doing at Dodgeball, way ahead of its time. The stuff we were doing at Google, ahead of its time. And even, we had a really kind of tricky spot in the middle of the Foursquare story where I was like, oh my God, this thing is again ahead of its time. This is going to be a huge pain in the ass to have to like, if this doesn't work, to have to do another one of these businesses. But luckily, like a lot of the stuff is starting to catch up, and it's not just. It's a little bit the phones are getting better. Like Foursquare wouldn't work if the iPhone didn't come along, if the App Store wasn't there. But a big part of it is this whole story for us wouldn't work if the Pilgrim technology didn't work. Like we went through a period where in like 2010, 2011, where our strategy was wait for Google to build a version of Pilgrim that we can use to do the things we need to do. Wait for that to be built into iOS, the operating system for the iPhone. And in 2011, I remember this clear as day, when they launched a new iPhone and the new iOS operating system, and it didn't have this stuff in it. It's like, we can't wait for someone else to do this stuff. We have to make it ourselves. And that's why we went back to the board, and it's like, we're not a social network. Like, we have to be a technology company that specializes in making the place shapes and understanding this stuff and making these tools so that other people can build the types of things that we're also imagining. And so, like when we launched Pilgrim, I wrote this big blog post about like, we have dreamed that you'd be able to do these things on phones forever, and now you can do them. What we didn't anticipate is that we would be the company that would make the tools that would enable us to actually do that stuff. And I think that's what puts us in a really interesting position. And I think what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years of the company is, with Jeff and the amazing team that we built around us is, it's not just like, Dennis's vision of building weird stuff for consumers, right? It's like everyone's vision of building, taking all this technology and making amazing applications and services for a wide variety of industries. And that's, advertising and enterprise and data analytics and, the urban planning stuff we were talking about. And, I think that's what's been so interesting and kind of rewarding about the journey.
I'd love to talk more about the new technologies and sort of new opportunities that are emerging that rely on this kind of location intelligence, and we've talked about this, but obviously you're powering the Snapchat filters.
Yeah.
So there's augmented reality, but augmented reality will go way beyond what Snapchat is doing. Where do you see sort of location intelligence sort of coming in, and what products and experiences might arise from it?
Yeah, we're in this like a little bit of a lull right now where there hasn't been some crazy new piece of technology in the last 5 or 6 or what's the iPhone, like 8 years old or something like that. Like I thought the awesome innovation that came from the iPhone is like here's an app store so people can make whatever they want and people can very easily get it. That's a huge deal. And then the idea that like you could open up Google Maps and there's a blue dot and it knows where you are, it's like that's a big deal. And GPS, like this, it hasn't changed at all recently. Like the big difference between what GPS offers, it gives you a latitude and longitude, a series of coordinates, and then as a developer, you're just stuck with a series of coordinates, and you still have to figure out like, well, what is that coordinate a bakery? Is it a gym? I don't know. I got to figure that out. Like the stuff that we've built is listen, forget about the GPS coordinate. We'll just tell you the name of the business. We'll tell you that it's a Panera bread shop or an Equinox gym, or we'll tell you the category. It's a cigar shop or it's a women's clothing store. And then developers can do whatever they want with that. We make it super easy for them to have that data. And so this idea, like we've lived through this period where the phones know where you are, and so therefore you can get real-time driving direction. Oh my God, that's crazy, right? The next thing is the phones will know where you go, and the phones will know the places that you've been to, so that when you ask Siri for a recommendation, like Siri knows all the restaurants you've been to. When you ask Alexa, like, where can I find this object? Alexa will know, like Amazon's Echo and Alexa and stuff. It'll know what you do in the real world. Like that's the natural extension of where a lot of this stuff is going. But it only works if the software has this awareness of like, well, where have I been? Where does the person that owns this phone, what do they do, and who are they, and what do they like? And that awareness is gonna, I believe is gonna be powered by a lot of the technology that we've ended up building. So, like the next version of Pokemon Go, not Pokemon Go specifically, but the next breakout location-based game, it's not just going to be, oh my gosh, there's a Pokemon on the street. It's going to be, if you go inside of a church, something different happens than if you go inside of a Home Depot than if you bring your character to a pizza place and it gets really lethargic or something. Like the games will change based upon where you bring them. The exercise apps will change based upon what you've done with them. We're talking about augmented reality experiences and like all the next stuff that will come, whether it's AR or VR, like those experiences will change based upon where you are using them, like in what context you are in and what context you have been in previously.
So we have to get to questions very quickly, but before we do, just one question, because yeah, with location intelligence, there are opportunities in AR, there's opportunities in marketing. Yeah. You bring in intelligent assistance, gaming, obviously.
Yep. Right.
You have created consumer products, that exist and in the past that have touched various aspects of this. I mean, you've obviously touched on gaming in Foursquare and Swarm. You have MarsBot, which is sort of the intelligent assistant. What role in the future is Foursquare going to play? Are you going to be empowering the future by working with lots of developers with some consumer-facing product, or do you see yourself sort of stepping in with a sort of bigger consumer product at some point?
I think what Jeff said earlier about like the mission statement that we used at the company for the longest period of time. Someday hundreds of millions of people will walk around with phones that know where they are and will make all these magical experiences happen. There was a period where it's like Foursquare is the name of that magical experience. And now I think we're starting to understand it's like, actually it's Foursquare Technology that powers that magical experience. Now it could be in the Foursquare app that we built for your phone or for your watch. It could be in the MarsBot app, which is like our version of Alexa. It could be in Alexa itself. It could be baked into your car. It could be baked into something that Snapchat does. At the end of the day, I think we're now, of the mindset of like, listen, as long as it doesn't matter who makes the stuff, as long as like we're involved in helping it be awesome and work really well and allowing other developers to achieve the dreams of what they want to build, like then we're doing our job.
So let's get to questions. Does anybody have one out there? Somebody's got to ask about privacy here because I didn't get to it. Diane.
Well, I just wonder with this awesome technology, does law enforcement or Homeland Security, or have you had any requests from them, or have you thought about how to deal with those requests?
Sure. So we're super vigilant about privacy, and to be very clear, like everything we do that's monetized is aggregate anonymous. So 30% fewer anonymous people go to a Chipotle. So we've never wanted to work with there's against our terms of service to do any kind of surveillance or law enforcement. We just don't participate in that because we just want people around the world. I mean, we depend on a community of 50 million people who keep the maps fresh, and we don't want anyone to feel like it's, Now, if we get a warrant that's signed by a judge, we legally have to comply. So that doesn't happen a lot, and maybe it'll happen more in the future. It has occasionally come up, but doesn't happen often. But we comply with a judge-signed warrant.
On the flip side of that, have you thought about any ways in order to increase civic participation in government and governance at all?
we put out, we were trying to get more millennials to vote, for instance, which is a perennial topic, and we created a guide for all the polling places in the United States and the nearest bar or coffee shop that you could go. So we thought that would entice millennials to vote, and we got a lot of attention for it. We also in our own apps, we worked with some nonprofits to understand the registration deadline in every state, for instance, and we pushed, hey, you've got to register this week, because it's often 90 days before the election till our users tilt a bit millennial, although they're of all ages and groups. So we try. We're having interesting conversations. Again, it's a developer platform, so I think there are some interesting things going on. And we're nonpartisan, to be very clear, we're just a tech company. But there are interesting ways to use the technology. I hope to get civic participation. I've had people approach us from kind of the resist movements or others saying how could you create a location-based social network that people can post to each other and meet each other who have like-minded views for organizing. And again, our tools are available for things like that. So I think there'll be more in the future, and I'm open to hearing ideas. Yeah.
Can you talk about your early adoption challenges, like when you first created the technology, it was not mature yet, people having it before. How would you retain your user base?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we had a real advantage by starting the company in 2009. In 2009, there'd be a new app every month, as opposed to 10 apps every single day. And so, we were able to hold people's attention for a longer period of time as we were making all these interesting changes to the app. And it's a real challenge. It's funny. Everyone thinks the Foursquare story is, hey, we started the company in 2009. We launched it at South by Southwest, and then it was just a rocket ship, and then we were awesome after that. But really, what happened is, we launched at South by Southwest, and then everyone came back from Austin and didn't use the app, and it was broken, and it only worked on iPhones. We didn't have an Android version, and we were flat and down and down and down, and we had to build that user base from scratch in the second half of 2009. And so, it took us, even after we had a prototype and after we had thousands of people using it, it took us 9 months to do our first round of financing. So it was really, really challenging. If anything, we were really good. I think the company's DNA is really good at user community and building stuff that users love and having a great rapport with them. And we did that in the dodgeball days. We did that when we were at Google. And so it just came kind of easy for us when we did it with Foursquare. And so, in addition to the 50 million people that use the products every month, there's tens of thousands of people that are super users. They edit the database the same way that people would edit Wikipedia. So they tell us this place is now closed, or this place doesn't open until late on Tuesday, or actually there's a brand new place here, let me type the address in for you. And so it's that great rapport that we have with users is part of the reason that the product and the data is so clean and so valuable. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay, cool.
Building on the user, on the accuracy of your database, what kind of an organization is required to keep that database accurate and up to date? It's intriguing to hear that now your users are big contributors to it, but how hard is it to keep up with constant changes in locations?
I think to build on what Dennis said, not many people have created anything that, like Dennis has, where 60 million people have become registered members in 200 countries. And so of the 50 million people each month who use the website or the apps, about 1 million a year actually contribute an edit. So, and that's exactly like what Dennis said. You can go in and say, oh, this place is missing, or it closed, or it opens late on Tuesday, or the phone number's changed, or whatever it is. And then that goes through to a community of about 40,000 Wikipedia-style super users who just want Paterson, New Jersey to be perfect, or whatever. They just love the game because the mayorships have to be right, or and it would be hard to create that now. When they created it early, this community it just loves the city guide and their lists and the game and keeping a sort of remembering everywhere they've gone, and so they keep it fresh. And so it's important to us that we have millions more check-ins a day globally than even in the buzzy years of 2011 or 2010 to 12. And so because it's much more global and it's owned. And we're not Snapchat or Instagram. We're not one of the billion DAU kind of players, but people love it and they keep it fresh. And that's important to us, which is why we still invest a ton in keeping the consumer apps great, because we don't have billions of dollars like Google to send trucks everywhere and all that. So people do it. It's people powered.
Are you getting new users, or are your original users aging up? And
yeah, people join every day. I mean, the original users are very loyal, which is nice. We have really sticky, but obviously you have to keep, to keep stable, you have to have new people come in, and we do constantly.
We have can I just add to that? We have a network of super users, and as we were talking about, we have a team internally that's like a kind of a community management team. There's this idea that started, I think, in 2010, that April 16th is Foursquare Day, because Four squared 16, right? And that wasn't our idea. The community made that, and they just kind of ran with it. And it's happened so many years in a row that sometimes it's not front of mind for us. And when it happened this year, which was a week ago, super users around the world, they throw events and parties, and they send me pictures of them at their parties. And so my Twitter feed was lit up with these people in Indonesia, in Japan, and all over Eastern Europe, just celebrating this holiday that they made up about the product that we made years ago. And it's the coolest thing in the world, right? And my mom's like, "Happy Foursquare Day," But that stuff, that type of stuff is great. And I'm not a part of all the communities I'm a part of. I've never seen that happen on a different app. And so that makes me feel really good about the stuff that we built. Yeah.
What do you do when you enter a new country, like a new geography?
Well, the last time we had to think about that was, the question was, what do we do when we have to add a new geography? The last time we had to think about that was, I think, in the middle of 2010. Foursquare was designed to be city by city, and I think we got up to, we started with 5 cities and we added 10, then we got 20, then we did 100. And then one of our engineers over holiday break said, "You know what, I'm just going to make it so it works anywhere. Is that okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then you could just add places anywhere that you wanted. And then once we opened that up, everyone kind of filled in the database, and then you just have this awareness of where everything is. And of course, there's new places added and removed every day as businesses open and close. But we never have to do any management where it's we turn a country on or we manage the, it's just there. We've already solved.
I mean, just if it wasn't clear, 100 million places were all created by users, And so when they'd open up Indonesia, because people in Jakarta were "Come to Indonesia, and we'll build it for you." And so people would self-organize like Wikipedia and tag every place in Indonesia and keep it fresh. I mean, it's an incredible community.
The first taste that we had of this was it was 2009, and there was these users, and they were a community in Vancouver that was begging me on email to open up Foursquare in Vancouver. And I was like, I don't even know if it's going to work outside of the US with the geocoding and the lat longs, and that's really far away from New York. And so I was like, okay, if you can promise me that you will add 300 places to the database, I'll just turn it on, and if it doesn't work, we'll turn it off. And so I turned it on for them on a Friday, and they did something where they got all these people to come together and just add places to the database. And we came in on Monday, and there was 1,500 places now registered in Vancouver. And we were like, holy cow, we could map the whole world. It was at this very clear moment of there's something here that we don't even fully appreciate yet. And we started just turning on cities one at a time before we got to that point where it's let's just flip the switch on the world and see what happens. But it was that was the user community showing us how to turn this thing into something awesome. And we just had to listen.
I hate to say this, but we are out of time. But
this is fun. These are great questions. So.
Great. Thank you guys so much. And we look forward to watching what Foursquare does next and everything that you power in the future. So
cool.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for having us here.
Thank you.